Parsha illuminated for Parshas Behaaloscha. So this Parsha is jam-packed, and there are so many exciting topics that we could speak about. We are going to focus on the very beginning of the Parsha and the very end of the Parsha. Those will be our two places that we visit today, and we'll begin with the beginning. So the Parsha opens. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, and Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, Daber al Aharon, speak to Aharon, ve'amarta elav, and say to him, Behaaloscha es haneros. When you, here they translate, when you light the lamps, literally when you raise up the lamps, El mul pnei menorah ya'iru shivas neros. Toward the face of the menorah shall they ya'ir, shall they cast their light, shall the seven lights cast their light. What does that mean? Towards the face of the menorah. So Rashi says, I'm skipping one Rashi, but Rashi says al mul pnei menorah, al mul ner ha'emtzai, toward the middle lamp, she'eno bakanim ela beguf shal menorah. The middle one was not on a branch; it was on the body itself of the menorah. So you had, like, the middle pole was, we could call the body, and then the branches came out from the middle pole. So you can call it the mul pnei menorah, the face of the menorah, meaning the menorah itself, which is the middle, and all the lamps were to face the middle. Why? So Rashi continues. The next Rashi says, and explains, Shisha shal sheshes hakanim, the six that were on the branches. The three on the east side would face the middle, and meaning, says Rashi, ha-pesilo shebahen, their wicks, the top of their wicks, facing towards the center. And so too, the three on the west would face the middle. So Rashi here is describing the menorah as going from east to west. And so there would be, or west to east, however you want to look at it, but there would be three lights to the east, three lights to the west. There is a dispute about this in the Gemara, I think, about which way the menorah faced. But Rashi is taking the opinion that it went from east to west, such that you have three to the east and three to the west. And why are all the lights to face the middle, says Rashi, Kidei shelo yomru le'ora hutar. So nobody would say that God, needs the light. If the light was shining out into the Mishkan, then one might say, oh, God needs the light, or even the Kohanim need the light. It's just a way of providing light. There's nothing special, nothing holy about this. But by having all the lights facing inwards, so it becomes clear that the purpose of the menorah is not to provide any kind of physical light, but it has a different purpose, and we'll have to see what that purpose is. But it's not just a mere candelabra that we need to light up the room. Okay. So God says to tell this to Aaron, and seemingly Moshe does that, although the verse does not say that he does, but then it says, verse 3, Vaya'as Cain Aharon, and Aaron did so, El mul pnei menorah ha'ela nerosa. He lit the lamps towards the face of the menorah, kasher tzivah Hashem es Moshe, as Hashem had commanded Moshe. Rashi comments, based on the Midrash, Vayas King Aaron, and Aaron did so. What is that there to tell us? Lahagid shivcho shel Aaron shelo shina. It's to tell you the praise of Aaron, that he did not deviate. He did exactly as he was commanding. And all the commentaries, I don't want to say all, but almost all the commentaries wonder, what in the world is this coming to teach me? Would anybody have thought that Aaron would have deviated from the command that God gave Moshe? It's to express the praise of Aaron, that he didn't deviate. He did exactly as he was commanded. What would we expect? Why is this the praise of Aaron, that he did as he was commanded? So there are many, many answers given. We'll mention a couple in short, and then we'll go through a longer idea from Rav Shlomo Kluger. So some of in short, the Ramban says that, to explain this midrash, that really, Aharon didn't have to be the one to do it. It could have been any of the other Kohanim who lit the menorah. It doesn't have to be the Kohen Gadol. But Aharon wanted the merit, wanted the special opportunity to do it. And not only did he do it the first time, but he always insisted on doing it. That's how much he valued this mitzvah. And the Milamed Shaloshina, that he never deviated, was that he was always the one to do it. And this came from his recognition of how special and great an opportunity it was to do this mitzvah. That's what the Ramban says. Others say, the Kotzker Rebbe, the Sfas Emes says similar, that you can read the word Melamed Shelo Shina to mean, Shina means he didn't change, but it also has the same root as the word Yashan, which means to get old. That Shelo Shina means he never let it get old. That each time that he did it, it was like it was a new mitzvah for him. He did it with the same excitement, the same passion, the same enthusiasm, the same concentration. He thought about all the special intents and kavanos that relate to this incredible mitzvah. And that's not just how he did it the first day, not just the second day, but Melamed Shaloshina, by asking Aharon did this each time without letting it get old. And actually, the Vilna Gaon points out that the word Shina, here in the text that I used, Shina spelled Shin Nun Hey. But if you add a Yud, either way, actually, this gematria is going to work. Shin Nun Hey would be gematria 355, which the Hebrew calendar sometimes says 355 days, sometimes 354, sometimes 356. But actually, sometimes even more if it has a leap year month, but it's right around 355 days. If you have the Yud, Shin Yud Nun He, then you add 10 days, it's 365. Either way, it expresses a year in some way, either a lunar year or a solar year. And the idea is that Loshina, that every day of the year was the same for him. He did it with the same passion and the same enthusiasm every single day. And that's the praise of Aharon. Not that he did it, but that he did it with the same newness each time. And that comes from appreciation for how special this mitzvah is, and is a reminder to us about the great opportunities that we have every day to fulfill God's mitzvos and to not just do them by rote, but to think about them and approach them with a sense of newness and passion, and that we learn from Aharon. Okay, but I want to share with you now a approach to this whole topic, this whole little event from the perspective of Rav Shlomo Kluger. Shlomo Kluger has a work called Imre Shefer. He was a prolific author, and he raises a number of other questions. So the Parsha begins, speak to Aharon and say to him, Behaaloscha es haneros, when you raise up the lamps. So, first of all, is this a command? Do it? Or when you do it, this is going to happen. It's interesting to note that God, it doesn't sound like he's being commanded to do it, at least not over here. It's just an expression of when you do it, this is how you should do it, or this is what will happen. So why is it not given in a language of tzivui, of command? Ta'aleh, raise them up, light them. Ha'aleh, whatever the grammar would be. But beha'aloscha means when you light them. Why is it not written as a command? Secondly, why doesn't it say when you light them? Behadlakascha, to light. Lahadlik is to light. Why does it say beha'aloscha, when you elevate them, when you raise them up? Why that expression? So Rav Shlomo Kluger says that these two questions were probably bothering the Midrash when the Midrash says as follows. The Midrash Rabbah, Rashi quotes a similar idea, but it's expressed a little bit differently in this Midrash. The Midrash says that in last week's Parsha, previously, in Parshas Naso, the Mishkan was inaugurated by the Nesiim, by the princes, the leaders of each of the tribes. Each one brought offerings. I did the math. I think each one brought 21 offerings, animal offerings, and there are other things as well. And those were the 12 tribes: Reuven, Shimon, Yehuda, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Binyamin. But Levi wasn't part of it. It was the 12. Sometimes we count the 12. We count Yosef as one, as we count Levi as one. Sometimes we count the 12 as Yosef as two, Ephraim and Manasseh, and Levi is left out. And that was the case, that 12 tribes brought offerings to inaugurate the Mishkan, but none of them were the tribe of Levi. So Levi was feeling down, the Midrash says. They said, why were we left out of this opportunity? So skipping a bit in the Midrash gives a mashal, and then the Midrash concludes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, God said to Aharon and his children, all of the Shvatim did their own Chanukah. You weren't part of the Chanukah, the dedication of the Mishkan, but you'll have your own opportunity, which will be Behaaloscha Haneros, to light the menorah. That the lighting of the menorah would be the dedication for the tribe of Levi, performed by their leader, in this case, Aharon HaKohen. Now, we can still wonder, says Rosh Shlomo Kluger, why put them through all this? Why not just have them participate in the initial inauguration? Why do they have to have their own separate inauguration ceremony, their own separate way to do it by lighting the menorah, different than all the other tribes, and have them left wondering, what happened to us? Why were we not part of this? Why put them through that frustration or pain in order, just to then reveal to them, oh, you have your own portion in this, you get to light the menorah? Suggests Rosh Shlomo Kluger, the purpose was not for their own benefit, but in order to show the proper honor to the great mitzvah of lighting the menorah. That, like we said, one might have thought that the menorah is simply, every room needs light, so every room needs a candelabra to light it up. So maybe that's all the menorah is. So maybe that's the case with the menorah. But by leaving the menorah to the tribe of Levi, to Aharon HaKohen, for that to be his way of inaugurating the Mishkan, or dedicating the Mishkan, that itself shows that this is not your ordinary candelabra, that this is a very special service and unique and impactful. And it's not le'orahu tzarich, it's not just for lighting up the room. He says, you can understand this with the following mashal, the following parable, metaphor of a king who is giving out gifts to all his friends, and he gives the same gift to all of his friends, and there's one friend who is his closest, most beloved friend, and everybody knows that. And to that friend, he gives him something that people really don't know what it's about. Like, is it a good thing? Is it special? Is it unique? Like, we wouldn't necessarily have realized on our own that this gift, this different gift that he gave to this one friend, is worth anything. Certainly, we wouldn't necessarily realize that it's worth more than the gifts that he gave to everybody else. But everybody else, he gave the same gift, and then to his closest, most beloved friend, he gave us a different gift. Well, obviously, that itself should tell us we may not realize the value of this gift, but if he gave that gift to his closest and most beloved friend, it must be extremely valuable. And that act shows the great value of that gift. On its own, we wouldn't know it, but since he gave it to his most beloved friend, that shows us how great the gift is. So he says that's what happened with Aharon. Everybody knows Aharon is so beloved. Aharon got chosen as the Kohen Gadol, as the high priest. So tribe of Levi has the priests come from them. So clearly they are on a special level in terms of God's love for them. And so if to everybody else sort of got the same gift in that they were, the gift is that they had the opportunity to inaugurate the Mishkan, but they all had the same. And now Aharon is given something different. Clearly he's being given something very special. And it teaches us how special lighting the menorah is. And he said, therefore, he had to wait till after. He had to wait till, everybody else got something, and now you get something different to show. It's not really for your own good. It's in order to be able to show how special the menorah is. And that's why it says, Behaaloscha haneros, when you raise up the lights. It's not just when you light the menorah. That's not what it means. It means when you show the great status, when you raise up, when you elevate the status of the menorah, then then they will shine towards the middle of the menorah. Now that step we still have to explain in a moment, but the question, why does it say Behaaloscha, when you raise up? Why does it say when you light? The answer is because it's when you elevate, when you show, by you, Aharon, being the one to light the menorah, you are going to show that this is not just another chandelier. This is a very special part of the Mishkan, and you are elevating it when you specifically are the one chosen to light it. Now, that also will help us understand El Mul Pnei HaMenorah Ya'iru Shivas HaNeros, that they will shine towards the middle, and it will also help us understand what was the great praise. Vayas King Aharon, and Aharon did so. Rashi says to tell you the praise of Aharon, Shelo Shina, that he didn't deviate. So continues Rav Shlomo Kluger, and he says that if we pay close attention, we can ask another question about the language of the verse. In verse 2 in Pasuk Beis, God says, actually Moshe says to Aharon, God says to Moshe to say to Aharon, when you light the menorah, El Mul Pnei HaMenorah, towards the face of the menorah, Ya'iru Shivas Neros, the 7 lights will shine. He doesn't say to light them towards the middle, right? Ya'iru means they will shine. That's how it's translated here, right? They shall cast their light. He didn't say you shall make them cast their light. They will, automatically. But what happens when Aharon actually does it? Verse 3, Aharon did so. He lit the lamps toward the face of the menorah. He lit them in that way, facing the middle of the menorah. Aharon, who asked you to do that? That's not what it said. That's not what God said. God said, when you light the menorah, they will cast their light towards the middle. So says Rav Shlomo Kluger beautifully. He says that what God was saying originally was, again, like Rashi said, El Mul Pnei HaMenorah, that which they shine towards the middle shows that they are not there for light. It shows that they are there for another purpose. They're there for the purpose of whatever the menorah's purpose is. So actually, what is that purpose? So many different explanations. The one that he goes with, which many say similar ideas, is that the menorah represents chachma, it represents wisdom, represents Torah, and the menorah gives forth the ability for people to understand Torah. It gives forth wisdom. It gives forth the light of the menorah shoots out wisdom, and definitely something that gets a lot of attention Chanukah time. Now, and the menorah actually represents the Jewish people. The menorah, I didn't read the verse, but the last verse says that the menorah is to be made of one piece of gold, one unit, which is about the unity of the Jewish people. The menorah itself represents the Jewish people, and the light shining towards the menorah means the light is for the Jewish people. The light of the menorah is for the Jewish people. It's to direct wisdom and Torah towards the Jewish people. Now, if this is saved for Aaron, this special avoda, special service, everybody else inaugurates the Mishkan with their offerings, but for Aaron, we have something special. And why? It's to show on its own how special lighting the menorah is. So if the very fact that Aaron lights it, that this is saved for Aaron, shows that this is not just a chandelier, so then you don't have to light the wicks towards the middle. That's self-understood that the menorah is not there for light. If this is the special service saved for Aaron, that itself indicates, that itself teaches, that is, as he said, Behaaloscha, when you elevate, when you raise up, by you lighting it, Aaron, you're going to show everyone that this is a very special part of the Mishkan. And it's not just there for light. And you don't have to shine them, you don't have to direct them towards the menorah. It's understood that they're directed towards the menorah. So originally God commands Aaron, when you elevate the menorah by lighting it, then they will automatically shine towards the menorah, so to speak, meaning it will be understood that the light is there not to provide light in the room, but to provide the light of wisdom to the Jewish people. It will be understood that there is a purpose, a very special purpose for this menorah beyond just lighting up the room. What does Aaron do, though? If Aaron were to just light it normally, then that would be an expression of Aaron saying, you're right, I am very, very special, and what I do itself shows how special the menorah is, and therefore we don't have to make the lights shine towards the middle. Just me doing it would show that. But Aaron's very humble. Aaron is humble, and Aaron takes the words of God and doesn't deviate from them. He says, oh, they're supposed to shine towards the middle? Okay, I'll make sure they shine towards the middle. And Aharon himself goes ahead and lights them with the lamp shining towards the middle. Vayas King Aharon did so, and he lit it with the lights shining towards the middle. Do you want to know how you know that this menorah is not for light? It's not because I lit it. It's not because I'm special and beloved by God and whatever. Obviously, if I'm doing it, it has some holy and special purpose. Aaron's not gonna go with that. Aaron says, "Oh, God said the light should shine towards the middle. Okay, I'm gonna light them towards the middle, and that's how everybody will know that it's not there to provide light, but rather it's there to provide wisdom." So the praise of Aaron, says Rav Shlomo Kluger, Sheloshin, that he didn't deviate, is that he took the words exactly, okay, they're supposed to shine towards the middle. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make them shine towards the middle. And this was out of his humility, that he didn't want the very fact that he's the one lighting to be that which shows everyone how special this mitzvah is and how the menorah is not just there for light. Rather, he's going to light them with the wicks facing towards the middle, and that will show that the menorah is not there for light, but rather the menorah is going to cast a different kind of light towards the lamps of the menorah will cast a different kinds of light towards the menorah, that being the lights of wisdom, the wisdom of Torah being cast towards the menorah, which represents the Jewish people. Aaron, out of his humility, did not deviate from this very simple understanding of the words that the lights are supposed to shine towards the middle, and that's what he did, and did not assume or allow for his own greatness to be the indicator of the greatness of the menorah. Okay, a very creative and beautiful explanation of Rav Shlomo Kluger, bringing out the humility of Aaron and the very important role that the menorah played, not as a provider of physical light, but rather a provider of spiritual light, of wisdom to the Jewish people. Okay, let's jump ahead now to the end of the Parsha. And at the end of the Parsha, we have an episode where Miriam and Aharon speak some kind of Lashon Hara about Moshe. So in chapter 12, Perek Yud Beis, verse Aleph, verse 1, it says, Vatidaber Miriam be'Aharon be'Moshe, and Miriam and Aharon spoke regarding Moshe, Alodosa Isha Kushis Asher Lakach, regarding the Cushite woman that he had taken, Ki Isha Kushis Lakach, because he had married a Cushite woman. Now, what did they say about Moshe? So, so there's different understandings of this. We're just going to go with Rashi, kind of the mainstream approach here. And we can understand what they said about him a little bit from the continuation of, meaning, so far all it says is they spoke regarding his wife. But what did they say? So if we continue, we can get a bit of an understanding. Vayomru, and they said, Harak ach b'Moshe diber Hashem. Does Hashem only speak to Moshe? Hello, gam banu diber. He also speaks to us. Vayishma Hashem, and Hashem listened. So they had some kind of claim relating to Moshe and his wife, and the claim was, does God only speak to him? He also speaks to us. So what is it that they said about Moshe? So I didn't put it on the page, but Rashi, and based on the sages, explains that Moshe had permanently separated from his wife because he didn't, if he would have relations, he could be in a state of tumah, of impurity, and God could come to speak to him at any time. And he didn't want to be in a state of impurity if God would come to speak to him. And therefore he permanently separated from his wife. So Miriam and maybe Aharon were discussing, and they said, well, we're also prophets, and we don't separate from our spouses. So what, why does Moshe think he's so special that he needs to separate from his wife? Then the Torah interjects and it says, V'yish Moshe anav me'od mikol adam asher al pnei ha'adama. Moshe was exceedingly humble, more so than any person on earth. Okay, thank you. Thank you for telling us. And then the story continues, and it says, Vayomer Hashem pitom el Moshe el Miriam. So God suddenly spoke to Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam, and he said, Tzu shlashtachem el ol moed, go all of you to the tent of meeting, vayitzu shlashtam. And they all went. Vayirid Hashem b'amud anan, and God went down in a cloud, vayamod pesach ha'oel, and he stood by the cloud stood by the tent of meeting, the opening of the tent, Vayikra Aharon and Miriam, and he called to Aharon and Miriam, Vayitzu shneim, and they both went out. Vayomer, and God said to them, Shimuna devarai, listen to my words. Im yeh neviachem Hashem, b'mara elav esvada, b'chalom adaber bo. So we'll just read the translation as it appears here. He said, please listen to my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, God, will make myself known to him in a vision. I will speak to him in a dream. Lo king abdi Moshe. But this is not so with my servant Moshe. B'chol beisi nemar, he is faithful throughout my household. Pel daber bo. With him I speak mouth to mouth. Umareh v'lo b'chidos. Unambiguously, without riddles. Utmunas, I think there's a missing word there. I think Tmas Hashem Yabit, I think it says. I probably tried to edit God's name and ended up erasing it. Utmas Hashem Yabit, and he sees the image of God. Umadua lo yiresem udaber b'avdi Moshe. Why were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moshe? Okay, so a lot going on here. Obviously, we don't have time to address every point, but I want to mention a couple points. First of all, we should realize that this is a very fundamental passage in our understanding of prophecy and of the uniqueness of Moshe's prophecy. This describes the difference between Moshe's prophecy and that of other prophets. It's 2 verses long. Those last three verses, 5, 6, and 7, Vav, Zayin, Ches, and and we need to examine them closely to understand how prophecy works and the difference between the prophecy of Moshe and the prophecy of other prophets, and how the Torah, the 5 books of the Torah, the Chumash being the prophecy of Moshe, how it is on a different level than other prophecies. Number 1. Number 2, I kind of alluded to when I read the verse, but the Torah interjects the story and describes Moshe's humility. And we have to understand why. Why does that belong here? It says they spoke about Moshe, and Moshe was very, very humble, and then it continues the story, and Hashem appeared to them. Why does he interject to speak about Moshe's humility? I did hear one answer, I think it was from Rav Hirsch, that it's explaining why they didn't really understand the greatness of Moshe. Moshe was so humble that he hid his greatness. They didn't realize that he was on a totally different level than him because of his great humility, and that's what caused them to assume that we're the same as Moshe. We're no different. But that's another question. And then if we pay really close attention to the words, there's some funny things going on here. So for example, in verse 2, Pasuk Beis, Vayomer, they said, Harak ach b'Moshe diber, halo gam banu diber. Does he only speak? So the simple translation is regarding Moshe, but literally b'Moshe means in Moshe. Halo gam banu diber. He also speaks, banu means in us. What does that mean? Does he only speak in Moshe? He also speaks in us. What do you mean in? And later, again, a similar language in verse 8, Pasuk Ches, Pe el pe adaber bo. Mouth to mouth I speak in him. You would think it should say lo, to him. Lamed vav, lo, means to him. But it doesn't say that, it says adaber bo. It says I speak in him. So why does it keep using this language of I speak in him? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to read from the Rambam in Hilchos Yisodei Torah, the laws of the foundations of Torah, how he describes prophecy and the difference between the prophecy of other prophets and the prophecy of Moshe. Says the Rambam in chapter 7, Halacha Beis, Hanaviyim malos malosein. There are a number of levels among the prophets. I'll read the English. Just as with regard to wisdom, one sage is greater than his colleague, so too with regard to prophecy, one prophet is greater than another. Don't think that every prophet, God speaks to prophet, every prophecy is the same level. Nope. One prophet is greater than another. They all, however, share certain commonalities. They receive prophetic visions only in a visionary dream or during the day after slumber has overtaken them, as it states in our verse. I make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Okay, so that's number 1, is that other prophets, and again, this is coming from our psukim, that it first says how you, Miriam and Moshe, experienced prophecy, and then lo king avdi Moshe, but that's not how Moshe does. So the first thing is, it said, I make myself known to him in a vision or in a dream. In other words, the person is not awake when they experience the prophecy. Vikulan, continuing, when any of them prophesy, their limbs tremble, their physical powers become weak, they lose control of their senses, and thus their minds are free to comprehend what they see. They need to let go of their physical self in order to then have the spiritual experience of prophecy, as it states concerning Abraham. So that's actually being proven from a prophecy that Abraham has. I didn't include the verse, but that's coming from that. The source for that is not our pasuk; it's somewhere else. Continuing in number 3, when a prophet is informed of a message in a vision, it is granted him in metaphoric imagery. Right? They have a vision, but we can see from the contrast in our verses, still on the same page. If you go back to the last verse in chapter 12, verse 8, when with Moshe, I speak mouth to mouth unambiguously, right? B'mareh v'lo b'chidus, without riddles, implying that for other prophets it's ambiguous. It's in riddles, so to speak. What does that mean? So the Rambam is telling us what that means is that it's a metaphor, it's imagery. It's not a clear message, but the power of the prophet is to immediately interpret that vision. Immediately, the interpretation of the imagery is imprinting upon his heart, and he knows its meaning. For example, the ladder that Jacob saw. This is also true with regard to other prophets. Some would relate the allegory and its explanation, as these did. Others would, turning the page, relate only the explanation. In other words, sometimes we have a prophet describe the image that they see and the explanation. Sometimes we only have the explanation. It doesn't mean there wasn't an image. Every prophet, besides for Moshe, experiences prophecy with an image, with a vision, a metaphor that they then interpret. They're given the ability to interpret it immediately, but it's interpreted a little bit, it's filtered through their perspective, through their vision. So sometimes in the prophets, we have both the image and the explanation. Sometimes we just are given the explanation, but it doesn't mean that they didn't receive it through a metaphor, through an image. Okay, skipping to number 6 now. Continues the Rambam, all the statements made above describe the path of the prophecy of all the early and later prophets, with the exception of Moses and Moshe, our teacher, the master of all prophets. What is the difference between Moshe's prophecy and that of all the other prophets? So, divine insight is bestowed upon all the other prophets in a dream or vision. But Moshe, our teacher of prophecy while standing awake, as it says, when Moshe came, this is the end of last week's Parsha, I think. When Moshe came to the tent of meeting to speak to him, he heard the voice speaking to him. So first of all, that implies he's awake. He would come and he would have the experience prophecy. Divine insight is bestowed upon all the other prophets through the medium of an angel. Therefore, they perceive only metaphoric imagery and allegories. Moshe, our teacher, would prophesy without the medium of an angel. Okay, now I think this might be the Rambam's own approach, but the general point is agreed upon, that everybody receives it through a metaphor, except Moshe would not have any metaphor. Pa'al pa'al, right? Mouth to mouth, I speak to him, is what it said in the pasuk. God works directly with Moshe, and it said, quotes a different verse, he gazes upon the image of God. There was no metaphor. Rather, he would perceive the matter in its fullness without metaphor or allegory. The Torah testifies concerning him, I speak to him manifestly without allegory. That was our pasuk. A different English translation, but our verse said unambiguously without riddles. Here it's translated as manifestly without allegory. His appreciation of prophecy would not be through metaphor, but through open revelation, appreciating the matter in its fullness. All the other prophets, fine, so it's clear, it's exact, it's not interpreted. It's Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem. This is the word that Hashem spoke to Moshe. Another way that the Midrash tells it is that other prophets, they say, Ko amar Hashem, so says Hashem, which is more of an approximation. But Moshe says, Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem. This is the matter, this means you can point to, it's exactly this. That was the prophecy of Moshe. All other prophets are over-eyed, terrified, confounded. Okay, let's leave that aside. And finally, all the other prophets cannot prophesy whenever they desire. Moshe, our teacher, was different. Whenever he desired, the Holy Spirit will envelop him, and prophecy will rest upon him. So Moshe has this uniqueness that he could experience prophecy anytime. He could experience prophecy awake, and he got it in with clarity and without any metaphor necessary. It was direct, pa'al peh, mouth to mouth, that God spoke to him. Now, the Nefesh HaChaim explains the depth of this whole of all of this. And he says that Moshe related to God in a way that others did not. Moshe related to God as Einod Milvado Mamish. There's nothing else in existence. Absolutely nothing. He says, Nachnu ma. What are we? We're nothing. What that means is that Moshe was able to live with the sense that God is the one true absolute existence, which is true, and we can all know it intellectually. God is the one true absolute existence. Everything else exists on God's whim, but would cease to exist if God decides that it shouldn't, which means that we, do we exist? Do we not? I mean, not to make ourselves crazy, but we only exist on God's whim. We're not in absolute existence. God is the one true absolute existence. Now, we can't live day to day like that. And nobody could live day to day like that. Even the forefathers didn't live day to day like that. Avram Avinu says, instead of saying we're nothing, like Moshe says, Avram says, we are afar va'efer. We're dust and ashes, but we're still something. We're low. We're almost nothing, but we're still something. We exist. He didn't. The forefathers and really all prophets lived with tremendous humility and recognition of God's greatness, that God is the source of all power in the world, but not with a constant awareness of the absolute nothingness of humanity or for all existence, really. There's only one who lived with that state of mind, and that's Moshe. And because Moshe lived like that, there was nothing separating him from God. There was no interruption. He completely relinquished his physical existence. And because of that, he could be awake when he had prophecy, because even when he's awake, he had no physicality to himself in a certain sense, because he lived with an awareness that he was nothing. He could experience prophecy anytime. He could experience prophecy awake, and he could experience prophecy directly from God because there was no interruption, nothing in between. The way it's expressed in the Midrash is Shechina medaberes mitoch grono, that God spoke from Moshe's mouth. The words that came out of Moshe's mouth were exactly the words of God. No metaphor, no interpretation, exactly the words of God. And that's the language that keeps being repeated in the verses here, that God speaks in him. They said, does God only speak in Moshe? Doesn't he speak in us too? Now, I'm not sure why they thought that. What they meant, does he not speak in us too? No, God only speaks in Moshe. You only have with Moshe that God spoke from Moshe's mouth. And at the end also, Pe'al daber bo. God says, I speak mouth to mouth in him. Directly in him, because the words of God came out directly from Moshe's mouth. Shechina medaberes mitoch grono. And that is how Moshe is able to, and again, we asked, why does it say in the middle here that Moshe was more humble than any person? But now we can understand, because that's why he was able to achieve the level of prophecy that he could, only because of his tremendous humility, because he lived on a plane of existence of not existing, of God is the only one absolute true existence. There's nothing more humble than that. And because of that, he was able to reach the levels of prophecy that he did. And so tucked into this chapter here at the end are extremely important foundations of our faith, really. It's one of the Rambam's 13 principles of faith, is to believe in the veracity of the nevuah, of the prophecy of Moshe, and to understand that it's not just an interpretation of Moshe, but the Torah itself are literally the words of God expressed from God to Moshe and then taught over to the Jewish people. Okay, we'll hold there.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
You're welcome.